Imagine this scenario. You wake up on a Tuesday.
Yeah, just a totally regular, unassuming Tuesday.
Right. The sun is barely up. Your guard is, completely down. You haven't even finished your first cup of coffee yet.
You're at your most vulnerable, really.
Exactly. And you make the mistake of glancing at your phone, and there it is, an incredibly passive-aggressive email from a coworker.
Ugh, the worst.
The timestamp says 7:43 a.m. The subject line is perfectly professional, but the message itself is, well, it's a landmine dressed in corporate punctuation.
Right, like just bubbling this up to the top of your inbox.
Or the classic, per my previous email.
That one is lethal.
It is. Instantly, your chest tightens. And by 9 a.m., you haven't even arrived at your desk yet, but you've already spent an hour standing in the shower, just staring at the tile, mentally screaming at this person.
You've gone to trial in your head.
Yes, you are prosecuting them in a fake courtroom in your mind. You feel completely, utterly exhausted, and your day hasn't even officially started. So if this sounds familiar, I want you to know you are not alone, and more importantly, I want you to just take a breath.
Because if your nervous system is vibrating right now from dealing with, say, a toxic coworker or a reckless driver or just the sheer weight of other people's demands, well, we have a profound intervention for you today.
We really do.
We're exploring a psychological framework that feels incredibly urgent, but it actually originates from a 4th century BCE text.
Right. We are unpacking excerpts from Lao Ma's Eastern study, and specifically, we're looking at the translation and interpretation of an ancient Chinese parable known as the empty boat. The mission of our deep dive today is to explore what might just be like the ultimate secret to never letting anyone steal your peace again.
A pretty massive promise, I know.
It is. But what if I told you there is an ancient surgical tool that could permanently stop you from taking these offenses personally?
I mean, sign me up.
Right. We're going to be drawing heavily on the philosophical foundations of ancient China, specifically the profound wisdom of the philosopher Zhuangzi. And to fully grasp the weight of this, we need to understand that Zhuangzi was a foundational figure in the tradition of the Tao.
The Tao, which translates to the great unnameable current of existence. It's the fundamental natural order of the universe. And along with the Tao, we'll be dissecting the practice of Wu Wei.
Wu Wei, right.
Yeah, this is a concept heavily emphasized by thinkers like Lao Tzu, and it's frequently translated as non-doing or non-forcing. But we are not just exploring dusty, abstract philosophy here.
No, not at all.
Zhuangzi and Lao Tzu were offering incredibly precise, sophisticated psychological technologies. I mean, they were mapping the human nervous system long before modern neuroscience even had the vocabulary to do so.
And the central proposition from Zhuangzi is just absolutely mind-blowing. When you read through these sources, the core question completely reorients reality. Like, what if the coworker who undermined you today or the stranger who was incredibly rude to you in line didn't actually mean to hurt you?
It's a wild thought.
It is. What if their behavior had absolutely nothing to do with you at all?
It sounds so counterintuitive because, well, everything in our biology and our social conditioning demands that we place ourselves at the center of the narrative.
Right. We're the main character.
Exactly. We are wired to perceive ourselves as the intended target of every single slight. But before we can administer Zhuangzi's ancient cure, we really need to accurately diagnose the modern disease.
Yeah, we need to look at the architecture of our own exhaustion.
We build these massive mental architectures just to process a single passive-aggressive interaction. It feels like a distinctly modern disease, doesn't it?
It really does. And the source material outlines an incredibly crucial distinction here, the massive canyon between physical fatigue and emotional fatigue.
Oh, this part is fascinating.
Right. Like if you spend 8 hours chopping wood or building a deck, your muscles are depleted. But the kind of exhaustion we are talking about today is the hypervigilant drain of having your peace constantly hijacked.
And the biological mechanics of that hijacking are just staggering.
Walk us through that because it's so different from just being physically tired.
Yeah, so when you perform physical labor, your muscles deplete their glycogen stores, lactic acid accumulates, and your brain receives a very clear biological signal to rest.
You feel sleepy, your body hurts.
Exactly. You sleep, your body repairs tissue, and you return to baseline. Emotional exhaustion, though, operates on an entirely different physiological axis.
It's sneaky.
Very. It's an exhaustion born of sustained hyperarousal. When that 7:43 a.m. email lands in your inbox, your brain's threat detector, the amygdala, it does not distinguish between a social slight and a literal survival threat.
Wow.
It doesn't know the difference between a predator in the jungle and a menacing sentence from an accountant.
So it just floods your system with cortisol and adrenaline, right?
Right.
Preparing you to either sprint away or engage in literal hand-to-hand combat.
Precisely. It's the exact same response, but with no physical outlet. Your heart rate spikes, your breathing becomes shallow, blood is actually diverted away from your digestive organs and into your major muscle groups.
Just from an email.
Just from an email. Your body is arming itself for a physical altercation that is never going to happen. You are sitting completely still in an ergonomic desk chair, but internally, your engine is redlining.
And that trapped energy has nowhere to go, so it just churns inward. You end up burning massive amounts of cognitive and emotional fuel trying to process a threat that exists entirely in the psychological realm.
Yeah, and this sustained hypervigilance, this constant low-grade scanning of your environment for the next attack, that's exactly why you can sit at a desk for a standard workday and come home feeling like you've been hit by a freight train.
Which brings us back to the shower and the mental courtroom we talked about earlier. You read the email, the cortisol floods your system, and instantly you are transported to this grand internal courthouse.
The mind is so quick to build it.
Oh, it really is. I think we all have a very specific architecture to our own internal courtroom, you know. You place yourself on the witness stand while the hot water runs over your back.
Right, you're the victim.
Yes. But then you step into the role of the defense attorney, pacing the floor, passionately arguing why your workflow is correct and why their email is completely out of line.
And the cognitive load of playing all those roles simultaneously is immense.
It's exhausting because you don't even stop at defense attorney. Then you become the ruthless prosecutor.
Oh, the prosecutor's vicious.
So vicious. You cross-examine your coworker in your mind, pulling up past Slack messages from like 3 weeks ago to establish a historical pattern of their toxicity.
Building a rock-solid case.
Exactly. You present this evidence to an imaginary jury of your peers, desperately trying to win a verdict that validates your anger. You script the perfect, devastatingly professional reply.
You anticipate their counter-arguments.
Right. You fight a phantom war while physically just trying to merge your car onto the highway. By the time you actually start your workday, you have survived a grueling, multi-hour psychological siege.
And what you are highlighting there is a catastrophic loss of presence.
Yeah.
Your physical body is engaging in the mundane tasks of the morning, but your consciousness is trapped in a simulated conflict. The brain consumes about 20% of the body's energy just functioning at baseline, you know?
Just to keep the lights on.
Right. But when it is actively engaged in conflict simulation, running scenarios, retrieving memories, formulating defenses, that energy consumption absolutely skyrockets.
No wonder we're so tired.
And the source material expands this phenomenon beyond just the workplace. It introduces what it calls the gallery of slights.
Oh, the portrait hall of wrongs. This concept hits so close to home for me.
It's a powerful metaphor.
It really is. It's not just the coworker. It is the driver who slides into your lane on the highway with no signal, forcing you to slam on the brakes, looking straight ahead as if you are completely invisible.
Infuriating.
The source describes how this triggers an ancient and volcanic fury. Your hands grip the steering wheel, you scream things that would appall your family.
And so you'd never say in public.
Exactly. And suddenly, you're carrying this hot, heavy grievance from intersection to intersection, basically transporting your injury through the city.
You become the curator of a museum dedicated entirely to your own victimization.
We curate this gallery so carefully, don't we? We hang portraits of the toxic boss who took credit for our presentation. We frame the friend who is suspiciously absent when we struggle, but suddenly appears when we succeed.
We adjust the lighting on every betrayal.
Yes, we get the lighting just right. And then at 2 a.m., when the house is quiet and we should absolutely be sleeping, we walk the halls of this museum. We stop and stare at each portrait, meticulously reliving the offense.
Which forces us to ask a very uncomfortable question, honestly. Why do we do this?
Why do we torture ourselves?
Right. Why do we expend such massive amounts of our finite life force maintaining this gallery? And the answer really lies in our evolutionary psychology.
It's biological again.
It is. Our brains are hardwired with a negativity bias. In the ancestral environment, remembering threats, pain, and danger was drastically more important for survival than remembering comfort or pleasure.
Because remembering the beautiful sunset doesn't keep you alive.
Exactly. Remembering the exact location where a predator nearly killed you, that keeps you alive.
So the mental courtroom and the gallery of slights,
Yeah.
they're actually just our brain's misguided attempts at self-protection.
They are mechanisms of threat prediction. We curate these slights to remind ourselves who is unsafe. We build ironclad cases in the mental courtroom to ensure we are never caught off guard again.
It makes sense on a primal level.
It does, but the tragedy is that in the modern world, where the quote-unquote predator is merely a passive-aggressive email or a rude stranger in a coffee shop, this evolutionary software misfires wildly.
It becomes deeply maladaptive.
Extremely maladaptive. And the core delusion that powers this exhaustion, the foundational error we make in the gallery, is how we view the perpetrators of these slights.
We view them as architects.
Yes.
We speak of them, and we genuinely think of them as if they intentionally, meticulously designed our suffering.
I'll give them so much power.
We do. We operate under the assumption that the driver who cut us off woke up that morning, rubbed his hands together, and thought, I am going to find a gray sedan on Interstate 95, and I am going to completely ruin their morning.
A cartoon villain.
Right. We believe the toxic boss constructed a master plan solely to diminish our light.
And this is the exact delusion that Zhuangzi seeks to dismantle.
So let's get into the cure.
To understand the cure, we really must travel back to the Warring States period of ancient China.
Let's set the stage a bit, because the historical context matters here.
It does. This was a time of immense social chaos, political betrayal, and constant warfare. Peace was not a luxury, it was a desperate necessity for survival. In this highly volatile landscape, Zhuangzi offered a parable that cuts straight through our modern delusion.
And the contrast between the chaotic, hypervigilant stress we just described and the setting of this parable is vital. Let's really step into that morning in ancient China.
Close your eyes and picture it.
Imagine the sun is just starting to burn off the thick mist, sitting low over a wide ancient river. The water is the color of old jade, moving with the slow, inevitable patience of 10,000 years.
It's so peaceful.
A simple farmer steps into his small wooden boat. He has a modest cargo of goods to carry to the market on the opposite bank. He pushes off the muddy shore, takes up his wooden oar, and the rhythm of the river just takes over. Pull, push. The soft aquatic resistance of the current. The mist swirling over the bow. It is a moment of pure tranquility. He is not in a mental courtroom. He is not scanning for threats. He is entirely present.
He is the embodiment of peace, moving in harmony with the Tao.
And then, without any warning, from out of the thick white mist, a sudden, violent crash.
Out of nowhere.
Another vessel rams directly into the side of his boat. The wood splinters and shudders. The jarring impact vibrates up through his arms and rattles his teeth. His balance is completely shattered, and he falls hard to his knees.
No.
Jade-colored water sloshes over the side, soaking his carefully packed goods. In a fraction of a second, his entire reality, his livelihood, and his physical safety are violently disrupted.
The boundary is breached, and the human animal reacts.
I want to pause here and completely validate this farmer's reaction, because it is just universally human.
Oh, absolutely.
Before his rational brain can even assess the logistical damage, the heat rises in his chest. It is fast and volcanic. He scrambles to his feet, gripping the wet side of his boat, ready to unleash absolute hell on whoever is steering the other vessel.
I mean, I would be doing the exact same thing.
Right. It is the exact same fury as the driver being cut off on the highway. Your safety was compromised. Your goods are ruined. Of course you are ready to scream, to curse their entire lineage, to demand an explanation for their sheer reckless stupidity.
The ego immediately arms itself for war. He is prepared to pour all of his adrenaline, all of his rage, into the architect of this disaster. He is ready to identify the villain and take them to court.
He turns his head, his face flushed, his mouth open to shout. He zeroes in on the other boat to confront the pilot, and he sees
No one.
no one at all.
The boat is entirely empty.
It is just a hollow wooden shell. It must have broken loose from its moorings at a dock miles upstream. It is merely drifting on the current.
It has no pilot?
None. It has no intention. It harbors no malice. It is a completely unconscious object, absolutely indifferent to the fact that it just collided with him and ruined his morning.
And the psychological shift that occurs in the singular moment is the crux of Zhuangzi's entire philosophy.
It's so profound.
It really is. The source text describes how, in the space of a single exhale, the man's fury suddenly has nowhere to land. The anger had crested into a tidal wave. It was ready to crash violently against an enemy, and then it simply evaporates into the mist.
Just dissolves.
Because who is he going to scream at? The splintered wood, the indifferent river, the fog.
You cannot take a piece of wood to the mental courtroom. You just can't.
No, you can't cross-examine an empty boat.
There is no argument to be won. There is no resentment to nurture. There is no elaborate story of victimization to carry with him to the market on the other side of the river.
The physical events still happen, of course.
Right. His knees are still bruised and his goods are still wet.
But the profound psychological suffering, it vanishes. He lets out a long breath, reaches over with his oar, gently pushes the empty boat away from his hull, and continues his crossing.
The elegance of this parable lies in what it reveals about the mechanics of human suffering.
Zhuangzi, as a master of the Tao, understood that the Tao is the underlying flow of existence, a flow that includes storms, broken ropes, and drifting boats.
He wasn't just offering a quaint pastoral folktale to entertain children.
No, he was delivering a highly sophisticated surgical instrument for emotional liberation.
The parable exposes, with such undeniable clarity, that our emotional exhaustion is not caused by the physical collisions of life. Collisions are going to happen.
They're inevitable.
Boats will bump into you, rain will fall, traffic will stop. The exhaustion is caused entirely by the story we attach to the collision.
The narrative.
Yes, it is caused by our desperate insistence that there is a malicious pilot in the other boat plotting against us.
And, we aren't navigating wooden boats on the Yangtze River anymore. We are navigating corporate offices, congested highways, and tense family dinners.
But the physics of the nervous system remain exactly the same.
The parable is a masterclass in what happens to our biology when there is no one to blame.
Implementing this requires a radical paradigm shift, though. It requires us to systematically remove the quote-unquote target from our mental narrative.
Right, and the source text is very careful to emphasize that Zhuangzi is not advocating for toxic positivity or denial here.
No, he's not saying just smile and let your boat sink.
Exactly.
Yeah.
He is not suggesting you stand in a sinking boat and pretend the water isn't rising. The water sloshing over the side is a real logistical problem. The passive-aggressive email is a real professional hurdle. The danger of a reckless driver is a real physical threat.
The impact has occurred.
Yes, the facts of the collision must be managed. But the story about the intent behind the impact, that is what must be rewritten.
We have to walk through our gallery of slikes and reevaluate every single portrait.
We do. And if you are listening to this right now, I want you to visualize the most difficult person in your life. The person who drains your energy, who occupies the most time in your mental courtroom.
We all have one.
Consider the staggering possibility that they are an empty boat.
Let's apply this to the 7:43 a.m. email. The co-worker with the corporate razors hidden in her syntax. If she is an empty boat, what does that practically mean? Because, my brain is screaming that she wrote that email directly to me with my name right there in the to field.
She directed the email at you, yes, but the origin of the hostility is not about you.
That's a huge distinction.
It is. She wrote it from the depths of her own unhealed pain and immediate circumstances. As the text speculates, consider the unseen currents pushing her boat.
Like what?
Well, perhaps she spent the entire night in a bitter argument with her spouse and hasn't slept a wink. Perhaps there are rumors of department layoffs, and she is secretly terrified of losing her livelihood, feeling desperately out of control. Or, delving deeper into psychology, perhaps she's operating from a profound childhood wound where the only way she ever felt safe was by controlling how everyone perceived her, by constantly establishing dominance to ward off vulnerability.
So she's just riding a turbulent, terrifying internal current.
Exactly. Her email was just her boat violently thrashing in the water as she panicked. You simply happened to be the nearest object she bumped into.
Okay, but what about the guy who cuts me off in traffic? That feels intensely deliberate. He physically maneuvered a 2-ton machine directly in front of mine, violating my physical space.
He maneuvered the vehicle, yes. But was his internal monologue focused on you? Was he analyzing your life, your feelings, your right to safety?
I guess not.
Almost certainly not. He might be rushing a loved one to the hospital in a state of sheer panic. He might be utterly consumed by a looming financial crisis, his mind completely detached from his physical surroundings.
That's entirely possible.
Or, as the source astutely points out, he might simply be a person who was never taught how to exist harmoniously in shared spaces. He may lack the fundamental cognitive software of spatial empathy.
He's just drifting blindly.
Right. He doesn't even comprehend the concept of a shared river, let alone the presence of other boats.
And then there's the portrait of the toxic boss, the one who deliberately steals credit for your projects in front of the executives. This one feels so malicious.
This is often the most painful portrait to reevaluate, but it holds the deepest truth. People who wield power harmfully are almost universally people who are once made to feel profoundly powerless and who have never healed from that foundational trauma.
Wow. Hurt people hurt people.
Exactly. Cruelty is rarely inventive. It is a legacy. It is a virus that travels forward in time, jumping from host to host. The cruelty you experience is real, but the origin of that cruelty is not you.
You didn't invent it.
No, you did not cause their dysfunction. You are merely the collateral damage of their unexamined history colliding with your present.
Okay, I follow the logic. I intellectually understand that their trauma is driving their behavior.
Yeah.
But I have to stop us here, because I think a lot of people listening are feeling the exact same friction I felt when reading this.
Lay it on me.
Even if it is a trauma response, it feels deeply, undeniably personal when it happens to me. When that boss takes credit for my specific project looking right at me, or when that email threatens my specific career trajectory, how do I separate the practical damage from the emotional story?
It's the hardest part.
It is. Because if I just wave my hand and say, oh, well, they're an empty boat, doesn't that make me a doormat? Doesn't that mean I am minimizing my own valid pain and allowing people to inflict damage on my life without consequence?
That is the ultimate crucible of this philosophy. It is the exact friction point where most people abandon Daoist principles, mistaking them for passive submission. Your pushback is not only valid, it is essential.
Thank you. It just feels like a risk to let it go.
To resolve this, we really have to look closely at a concept from modern psychology that the text brings into dialogue with Zhuangzi. And that's the fundamental attribution error.
Okay, let's dissect that. What exactly is the fundamental attribution error, and how does it keep us trapped in the mental courtroom?
It is one of the most robustly documented cognitive biases in human psychology. It describes a pervasive flaw in how we judge human behavior. The error states that when we observe someone else's bad behavior, we automatically attribute it to their fixed character.
Like they're just a bad person.
Right. If a colleague snaps at you, you conclude, he snapped at me because he is a fundamentally selfish, aggressive jerk. But when we engage in the exact same bad behavior, we attribute it entirely to our circumstances.
Oh, man. That is so true.
If you snap at a colleague, you justify it by saying, I snapped because I was up all night with a sick child, my commute was awful, and I am under an unreasonable deadline.
We judge others by their actions, assuming it reveals their soul. But we judge ourselves by our intentions and our struggles.
Precisely the discrepancy. We understand implicitly that we have a complex, ever-shifting web of circumstances, stressors, and contexts. Yet we reduce others to fixed, flawed caricatures.
Why do we do that?
Well, the fundamental attribution error is the brain's attempt to conserve energy. Analyzing the infinite variables of someone else's life takes way too much cognitive processing. Labeling them an evil architect is a fast, efficient shortcut.
But it's a shortcut that leads to so much pain.
Exactly. This shortcut creates endless, grinding suffering. When you take the boss's credit stealing personally, you are committing this error. You are assuming their action is a deliberate, targeted judgment of your worth, rather than a frantic manifestation of their own insecurity.
So Zhuangzi is asking us to extend the same nuanced grace to others that we implicitly demand for ourselves.
Yes. He is asking us to recognize that they too are driven by circumstances, by invisible upstream storms of stress and fear.
So adopting the empty boat mindset isn't about letting them off the hook or offering yourself up as a sacrificial doormat. It is about demanding an accurate diagnosis of reality.
It is the ultimate form of psychological realism, and the relief that accompanies this depersonalization is staggering. The text refers to it as an armored, practical freedom.
Armored, practical freedom. I love that.
When you truly internalize that you are not the target, when you comprehend that their behavior is a desperate reflection of their relationship with themselves and have absolutely nothing to do with you, you instantly neutralize the threat.
You take back your peace.
You do. You do not have to defend your fundamental worth against an empty boat. You do not have to prove your value to a piece of drifting wood. The courtroom of the mind is adjourned, the gavel drops, the trial is over.
Because there is no defendant in the dock. The courtroom is empty. That realization alone lifts a massive weight. But, understanding this at midnight, sipping tea while listening to an analysis of ancient philosophy is one thing.
It makes elegant sense in theory.
Right. It's beautiful in theory. But the true test is the application. When the alarm clock goes off, when the 7:43 a.m. email actually hits your retinas and your cortisol spikes, how do we intercept the biological reaction? How do we stop the mental courtroom from convening in real time?
This is where the philosophy transitions into active technology. This is where we must engage the practice of wu-wei.
Wu-wei, that's spelled W-U-W-E-E-I, for anyone wondering. The art of non-doing.
Yes, from the deep traditions of Lao Tzu and Zhuangzi. And it is imperative that we dismantle the Western misconceptions of wu-wei. It is so frequently mistranslated as passivity, laziness, or a nihilistic surrender to fate.
The idea that you just throw your hands up and say, whatever happens, happens, let the boat sink.
Which is a complete distortion of the Tao. A much more accurate translation of wu-wei is non-forcing or effortless action. It is the radical, highly disciplined practice of not adding your own force to the momentum of a situation that does not require it.
The text leans heavily into the analogy of water here, which is the quintessential Daoist imagery.
Lao Tzu observed water endlessly.
And if a river encounters a massive boulder in its path, the water does not clench up and try to punch a hole through the rock. It doesn't stand in front of the obstacle and argue with it about fairness.
No, it doesn't exhaust its energy fighting the unmovable.
It simply conforms to the reality of the rock and flows around it. It finds the path of least resistance.
And through that very yielding, water remains the most powerful force on Earth. Over enough time, water effortlessly carves the canyon and grinds the boulder to dust.
So how does that apply to our nervous system?
Applied to our neurological reality, wu-wei is about locating and expanding the microscopic window between stimulus and response. Modern neuroscience perfectly aligns with ancient Taoism here. When you read that offensive email, your amygdala fires instantly. That is the biological stimulus. It is out of your control.
You're going to feel the hit.
Yes. But before your prefrontal cortex, the logical, planning, action-oriented part of your brain engages to draft a fiery, career-ending response, there is a microsecond of space, a tiny window of neurological delay.
That split second where you feel the hot flush of anger in your chest, but your fingers haven't started typing yet.
In that fleeting window, you have a momentous choice. You can choose to practice forcing. You can summon the entire history of this coworker's slights, load your own boat with heavy stones of grievance, armor up, and ram right back into them.
You can add your precious life force to the collision.
Or you can choose wu-wei. You can recognize that the momentum of their anger, their passivity, their toxicity belongs entirely to them. You do not need to subsidize their storm with your energy. You can step aside.
You can let their momentum carry them right past you while you remain anchored.
Precisely.
I love the visualization of stepping aside. But I have to bring us back to the practical boundary, because we cannot leave the listener thinking wu-wei means absorbing damage. Setting boundaries without the story. Zhuangzi's farmer did not just sit in his boat with his hands folded while the empty vessel smashed his hull to pieces and drowned him.
No, absolutely not. He reached out and acted. He protected his hull.
Exactly the distinction we need. If an empty boat is drifting aggressively towards you, you take your oar and you firmly, decisively shove it away. You do not allow it to share your water.
Yes.
In the modern equivalent, if you have a toxic boss who is stealing your work, pushing the boat away means meticulously documenting their behavior and going to human resources.
Right.
If you have a passive-aggressive coworker, pushing the boat away means setting an unshakable boundary, like stating clearly, I will only respond to emails that contain direct, actionable requests.
You take the necessary logistical steps to protect your career and your peace.
Exactly.
The profound secret of wu-wei is that you take these protective actions without the emotional story.
That is the masterstroke. You push the wooden boat away without feeling hatred for the wood. You document the boss's inappropriate behavior because it is a matter of professional navigation, not because you need to spend your entire weekend performing a monologue in your mental courtroom about how fundamentally evil they are.
You protect yourself purely as an act of physics and logistics. Yes, entirely divorced from ego, vengeance, or victimhood.
Because when you remove the emotional story, you are protecting your inner water. This concept from the text is perhaps the most visceral, actionable analogy of all. I really want to spend some time exploring this inner water budget.
It is a framework that can change your life immediately. Imagine that every single morning, you wake up with a finite, measurable volume of what the text calls inner water in a delicate ceramic bowl.
A very fragile bowl.
This water represents your entire cognitive bandwidth for the day. It is your capacity for attention, your emotional resilience, your ability to be present with your children, your creativity, your joy. It is the most valuable, irreplaceable resource you possess.
It is literally your life force.
And it is strictly finite. When the bowl is empty, It is empty. You cannot just magically synthesize more inner water at 3 p.m. with another cup of coffee.
I've certainly tried, but it doesn't work.
The well has a bottom. Now, keeping that fragile bowl in mind, what happens when you obsess over someone else's thoughtless drift? What happens when you spend 3 hours pacing the floor of the mental courtroom, cross-examining the coworker who sent the 7:43 a.m. email? What are you actively doing with your inner water?
You are pouring it out. You are literally tipping the bowl over.
You are pouring your irreplaceable life force into a bottomless, cracked vessel. You are spending your finite resources irrigating someone else's unconscious neurosis. And the tragic irony is that the coworker isn't even receiving that energy.
No.
They are likely at lunch, completely oblivious to your suffering, eating a sandwich. You are fighting a phantom, and in the process, you are draining the very reserve you need to build your own life.
So recognizing the empty boat is not just a philosophical trick. It is fundamentally an act of severe, necessary energy conservation.
It is a radical act of self-preservation. It is making the executive decision that your inner water is far too valuable to be splashed away on random collisions that have nothing to do with your core purpose.
Which brings us to the ultimate view of reality in this deep dive, the equanimity of the Tao. If we can actually master this, if we can learn to guard our inner water, if we can intercept the fundamental attribution error and stop arguing with drifting wood, we align ourselves with something infinitely larger than our own egos.
We align with the nature of the Tao itself. Zhuangzi describes the Tao as the great river beneath all rivers. It is the foundational silent current that holds all of reality. And the defining characteristic of this great river is its absolute, unshakable equanimity.
It holds everything equally, without judgment.
Yes. The Tao carries the furious, screaming man shaking his fist in his boat, and it carries the silent, drifting, empty wooden boat with the exact same unconditional support.
Wow.
The water does not take sides. It does not judge the angry man as morally corrupt and the empty boat as righteous. It does not hold a grudge against a violent thunderstorm that disrupts its surface. It simply absorbs the impact, holds the weight of all things, and continues its inevitable flow toward the ocean.
We are human, though. We have to acknowledge that we are not going to become perfectly enlightened, serene rivers overnight.
No, we are going to get angry.
Right. We are going to feel the sting of rejection. Our hulls are going to get bumped. But the goal of studying Zhuangzi, as the text beautifully points out, is not to lobotomize yourself or deny your very real human emotions. The goal is the refusal to be colonized by them.
That specific word, colonized, warrants deep reflection. To be colonized means a foreign external power has crossed your borders, moved into your territory, taken over your natural resources, and dictated new laws that serve only them.
It's an invasion.
When you allow an offense to linger, when you harbor deep resentment over a passing slight, you are literally allowing the offender to colonize your mind. You are granting them a permanent settlement in your nervous system. You are letting them harvest your inner water.
You are actively paying rent for them to live in your head while you sleep on the couch.
It is the ultimate forfeiture of sovereignty. To align with the Tao is to reclaim your borders. It means you allow yourself to experience the flash of anger, the initial shock of the collision, but you let it pass through your ecosystem like a weather system moving over a valley.
The storm passes.
The rain falls, the river swells, the storm breaks, and the river immediately returns to its natural banks. The landscape is not permanently altered by a temporary storm. You must actively refuse to let the fleeting, unconscious collisions of daily life become permanent, governing residence in your psyche.
We really need to operationalize this. We need to give you a practical, tactile exercise to use today, because the next collision is coming.
Oh, it is definitely coming.
The next passive-aggressive email will arrive. The next driver will cut you off. When that happens, before you let the amygdala hijack your day, before you hit reply, before you lean your entire body weight on the car horn, the source text offers a brilliant visualization. I want you to hold a smooth, cool stone in your mind.
The stone of profound possibility.
Yes. Just for 1 second, feel the weight and the coolness of that stone. Hold the possibility that this person who just offended you is completely unmoored. They are riding a terrifying upstream storm of trauma or exhaustion or fear that you know absolutely nothing about.
You don't have to play armchair psychologist either.
No, you don't have to map out their childhood wounds to justify their behavior. You just have to hold the stone and say, this is an empty boat. This thumping against my hull is not about me.
Feel the physiological cooling effect of that realization. Give the boat a gentle, logistical push with your oar and calmly continue your crossing.
It is the establishment of the ultimate compassionate boundary. It is looking at the chaos of another human being and saying, I see that you are thrashing in the water, but I will not let you pull me under. I will not drown with you.
Such a powerful stance.
So let's bring all of these ancient threads together. We started by diagnosing a very specific modern agony, the deep, cellular, hypervigilant emotional exhaustion that comes from navigating other people.
And we discovered that this exhaustion is largely self-inflicted.
Right. It is fueled by our own evolutionary software misfiring, by our ego's desperate insistence that the difficult people in our lives are malicious architects intentionally designing our pain.
But by stepping into Zhuangzi's mist-covered river, that illusion is stripped away. The parable reveals the stark reality that most people are simply empty boats. They are drifting blindly on the chaotic currents of their own stress, their own unhealed generational wounds, and their own blinding exhaustion.
And when we realize the boat is empty, the anger instantly loses its target. The fundamental attribution error is bypassed. We plug the leak in our bowl and we save our precious inner water.
We stop fighting phantom wars in the mental courtroom, and we finally reclaim our sovereign peace. We practice the art of wu-wei. We do not force, we do not retaliate, we just navigate the river.
It is a profound, life-altering relief. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with one final lingering thought, something to turn over in your mind as you go about the rest of your day or as you lay your head on the pillow tonight. We have spent this entire hour talking about granting this radical Daoist grace to others. We have explored the immense armored freedom of recognizing the toxic coworker, the reckless driver, or the rude stranger as empty boats driven by unseen currents.
It is an incredibly powerful lens for looking outward at the world.
But what happens when you turn that lens around? What happens when you look in the mirror? Because the uncomfortable, beautiful truth is that you have days where you are pushed to the absolute brink.
We all do.
You have days where you are utterly depleted, running on fumes, reacting sharply from your own old wounds and insecurities. How often are you the empty boat? How often are you the one bumping blindly into the people you love the most, causing ripples, spilling their cargo? Not because you're a malicious architect, but because you were just so overwhelmed by your own unseen upstream storm.
It is the most humbling realization of all. We are all drifting.
We are. And if you can offer this profound ancient forgiveness to a reckless stranger on the highway, if you can look at the person who wronged you and say, you are just an empty boat and I release you, isn't it time you offered that exact same grace to yourself?
You are allowed to be the empty boat, too. The river holds you just the same.
We are all just trying to cross the water. Protect your peace. Guard your inner water today. We'll see you next time.